Wanted to do a video for the Atari fans out there. We're going to go over some input options for the Atari. We're going to talk about the 7800, which will do the 2600 games as well. And we're also going to look at the 5200. Okay, let's have a look at the adapters we'll go over today. Here's just a quick overview of what they kind of look like, and let's go into detail. Okay, these are the one on the left is the bridge. That is going to take signals from this Gamer Pro and allow it to work on the Atari. The cable in the middle is just the link cable so that you can connect this bridge to the Atari. There is a switch on this cable that is for its modes, because it does support a couple of different consoles like the Sega Master System. And that's what that switch is for. It's in the Atari position at the moment, which does support the 7800 and the 2600. The cable for the 5200 obviously is not going to be the same cables. It's not the same shape. This adapter here, this is kind of a very niche case thing. It's called a blender. It does all kinds of things to controllers, like mixing them together and separating them apart and remapping them and things like that. It's better to show that than to explain that, so I'm going to leave that for later. And this last piece here, it's the open version and the closed box version, so that you can see what it looks like on the inside of the Air. And in the shortest, simplest explanation, the Air is essentially a wireless option for old cables, old cabled controllers. Obviously, you're not getting a pure wireless solution there, but it does give you the freedom to have a controller on a different side of the room and not have it connected to a console. And so we'll go over that a little bit and show how that works. So these are the adapters that we'll be going over today. In the video, we'll just talk about each one. So the first one we're going to talk about really is the Gamer Pro. If you're familiar with the product, you probably already know what this thing is. As you can see, it's a USB out, and then you have the input cable, which is connected to the PlayStation at the moment, that connects to that Gamer Pro. When you connect these three things together, you're going to get a USB adapter. Let's see what it looks like connected. And there it is. Nothing to it really. Once you connect it to the Gamer Pro and you plug it into the USB, it'll power up, detect PlayStation, and you'll have a USB device. But how does that work on a console, you wonder? That's the next step. And that looks like this, as I explained earlier. And you simply just connect the USB into the input. The actual bridge doesn't read USB devices, so please don't get the impression any USB device will work. It reads a thing called low-level API, or LLAPI, and that is a protocol that was invented with the Bliss-Box adapters. It is open source and used in a few other products on the market. So for the most part, anything that supports low-level API will work. The configuration would be the question. With the Bliss-Box, you have the mapping all set up for you because the code figures it out. But it will read low-level API signals. But let's have a look at what it looks like on the console. And as you may have guessed, it just plugs right in. If we follow the chain down, we have it all the way to the controller. And the power does come from the console. In most all cases, there's enough power in the console to do what we need to do. This is certainly one of those cases. And all aspects of that controller will work, including rumble. But as you know, the Atari has no way to shake the controller, so that feature isn't really used in this case. But let's have a look at how this works in a game. Okay, so here's a game running. You probably won't be able to see the controller too well, but I'm sure you know what a PlayStation controller looks like. So we're not going to focus on that. I'm just going to kind of focus on the gameplay here. So what I wanted to demonstrate is that you can play the game with the stick on the left. You can play the game with the stick on the right. And you can use the D-pad. Obviously, you're going to need a button, and there's your button. So essentially what we have here is that Gamer Pro connected to the console, as you saw earlier, through the bridge. And it's communicating the inputs from the controller onto the game. And I know a good a big question a lot of people have. So I'm just going to kind of explain that in some detail, and that's lag. So the way that lag is interpreted by most everybody on the internet is if they press a button, they get an effect at a time later than when they pressed it, and they identify this as lag. Well, in reality, that's not how that works. The game is going to pull the controller at an interval, and 9 times out of 10, in just about every single game, that's going to be based on once a refresh rate. That's not a hard, fast rule, but that is literally what you see. And on this frame rate NTSC, we're looking at approximately 16 milliseconds. So yeah, there's a 16 millisecond lag on the original Atari. If you hit a button, that response isn't going to be picked up until the next frame rate. There's no difference here. So what we did is we took advantage of the 16 milliseconds after it read the button state. We go send the signal to the controller, we get the new payload, and we come back. All of that happens relatively in under 3 milliseconds. So we can do it many, many times if necessary in between each pull. So yeah, the lag is kind of a silly question. It's completely irrelevant, and it has no basis of argument if you understand the science behind it. Where it does pull a bit of a concern is where you have a situation where the game is pulling a little bit faster. On a computer, it pulls it about once or twice, pulls it at 1 or 2 milliseconds with the USB 2.0. And yeah, you will notice a lag issue at 16 milliseconds on a computer. It's just something that we all kind of notice. You don't seem to notice it on a console. The main reason for that is that the console can pull the controller when it wants to pull a controller. The computer has to just pull it in sequence. It isn't going to be draw to the frame, pull the controller, draw to the frame, pull the controller. They're both independent buses. So sometimes they coincide and sometimes they don't. And that's where lag comes in. So the longer the pull rate, with some controllers are 32 milliseconds, you're drawing a couple of frames and running some code in the background while the controller isn't pulling, you're going to notice that. So when it comes to consoles, the lag is not really a relevant thing, going back to consoles this old. There are games, probably racing games, where these controllers are pulled more often, like the driving controller, trackball games. You have to pull it quicker. 16 milliseconds isn't going to get you anywhere with a trackball. So yeah, there are games that do that, and that's where the lag will come in. I've never seen any situation like that in working with this product. If it ever comes up, I'll be sure to make a video over it. There are situations that I have ran into, for example, the trackball Atari controller. The controller itself cannot be read and used on a game that you want to emulate the trackball on, because it's only pulled every 16 milliseconds, and that's not enough resolution to use that trackball. But a trackball game would absolutely pull it faster. So in the future, we'll probably look at those, rare situations. But I wanted to cover that ground because I know it's a huge topic. Okay, next up, I'm going to go ahead and show something a little more exciting. Same setup, nothing's changed. Got Video Olympics up on here, and got a PlayStation controller. Now, the way that this works is if you play with a PlayStation controller, it's a Atari controller. But if you hold the L and the R button down, you effectively have 2 paddles. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the point of that, right? Like, you're going to play the game by yourself? No, not really. It's just to demonstrate that this can work. If you had a controller that had 2 analogs, or even 1 analog, you'd be able to use the analogs in place of the paddles. But just to demonstrate that, I'm actually going to hook up a pair of Atari paddles to this existing setup. So it's not actually going to go through the console as direct from paddles. It's actually going to go through the adapter just to kind of prove what I'm talking about. And then we're going to show some other devices. Okay, just to cover the bases here, this is the original Atari paddles. Again, it's going through the Gamer Pro and then through the bridge. But as you can see, they work just like the original paddles did. The buttons correspond to the paddle. I got mine marked. So that's always confusing to me to figure out which one's what. But you can see that works the same way. This is just to show you that pass-through does work. Not that there would be a need to do anything like that, but the concept is there. No additional programming needed. It just passes through the information. But let's take a look at something else. Okay, one that's a little more interesting, the Sega paddle. kind of like the old Arkanoid, same type concept. This is an analog to digital, so it's much more fluent. It gives you a lot crisper response. So this might be a little bit better than those Atari paddles, unless you prefer those. And of course it works with any dial. Steering wheels included. DJ Hero has a little dial. Any of those types of things. Even the Atari Pippin has a mouse interface, which you'll be able to use that as well. But there's one more I want to show you. Here we have a tablet, right? This is the UDraw tablet, and again, that works. That kind of give you an idea what a trackball might feel like if it had the resolution to keep up with it. Now this one does. Kind of the same as the Pippin controller read-write as well. But as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can use analogs to play games with the Atari paddles. So I wanted to go ahead and cover that. And then the same would be true with the 5200, which we might get later too here in this video. Okay, this is a setup that's a little tricky to get set up and working unless you've done it before, but if you follow the instructions, they can be provided. You know, it's going to do its job. So what we're doing here is we have two bridges connected to the Atari. And those two bridges go to either side of the blender. See if I can zoom in on that. Okay. And then out of the blender, you have a Gamer Pro that goes to a controller. So the whole entire point of this is that we're taking that one controller and we're splitting it into two. So if you are a 7800 fan, you probably know where I'm going with this one. I do have videos that show how to set up Blender. It goes into a little more detail, but I wanted to show you how it looked set up. Let's have a look at the game and see what it does. And if you guessed Robotron, you are a 7800 fan. So the way that this one works is the buttons are going to be the L and the R. So if you hit the top right button, it's the active button. The left controller's here and the right controller's here. So without further ado, yes, Robotron does work with one controller. You don't need to fool with two of them, which it's a lot of fun to play that way, but even more fun this way. This is heaven for me because I kind of grew up on this game on the PC, but I used a keyboard, of course. It had its own limitations and issues, but it was fun growing up, and this definitely brings it back for me. So there we go. That is 7800 working with just one controller. Okay, for this last one here, we'll have the lights on so we can see a little bit better in the room. As you can see, I'm playing an adventure game again. And what I want to demonstrate here is that there's our Atari with a blinking light attached to it. And there's the controller and the receiver on the other end of the room. So we've effectively gone wireless, but of course we still have wires attached. But again, I know that a lot of people are concerned with things like lag. But as I explained earlier, that's not really relevant in this situation. We can do a lot in 16 milliseconds. What does it add? It does add about 2 milliseconds, but it runs in parallel. So you're still looking at a total of 3. It doesn't need to have one thing done and then another thing that issues another and another. It can constantly be pulling each adapter at the same time. So again, I played a lot of high-speed games with no issues with this. So we do have the option to do a wireless setup. And this is not specific to Atari. This video is. These setups work on all the consoles that you've probably seen. You pan through. They're all kind of set up under this television set here, and this is kind of the demo room for these kind of things. But that concludes the 267800 portion. Let's have a look at the 52. Okay, for the 5200, basically what we have here, I just loaded a game so we can see that we can move around on the screen pretty much. You can use any of the sticks. You can use the D-pad. All that will get you around. D-pad obviously is full extended stick. And then the regular sticks would be kind of normal like it would on the 5200. The The button layout is obviously the crazy thing. So kind of what we did here is start your pause, select as options. You can access some of those other buttons. And then, as you know, there's side buttons, and that's what these guys are mapped to here. You can use a number pad. Any of the number pads would map over to the number pad correctly if you wanted to do that. So if you want full control of what the controller has to offer, either you would want to use a controller that has that button layout like a Coleco or Intellivision, or you use something like the Blender where you can have two controllers mixed into one. But this is just the simple part of it, not too exciting. This will allow you to use another controller instead of using the 5200. But let's take a look at something a little more exciting here. Okay, so here we have Super Breakout. You hit this select to get the game going. And now you can see that the stick is controlled in the same fashion as it would be on the 5200. But now you can use the analog stick of another gamepad. So we can also use other controllers. So let me set up another one here. One of my favorites is the Pippin controller. And that works just like a mouse. Really nice gameplay there. Definitely if you're looking for a nice substitute, this works. The Atari paddles, of course, work. Arkanoid controller works. The Sega paddle works. But one more interesting one, and as you may have guessed, that's the tablet. Again, it's a different way of playing, but it is rather nice. It's got the trigger ball that you can press on the side there to get the ball launched and everything. So a lot of other options there to play with the analog on the 5200. But there is one more interesting game that we definitely have to cover. Take your guesses and see if you get that one right. And yes, if you guessed Missile Command, you are correct. So currently I'm playing with a PlayStation stick, which in my opinion is just terrible. It's not really much different than the actual 5200. It's way more sensitive. But to make the game a little more interesting, we can use some of those other controllers. Let's take a look at them. The Pippin works pretty well. It's a mouse, kind of like a mini trackball. Way better to play, obviously. You use your left-handed control. And if you want to cross your hands over, you of course use the right. I prefer left. But there is that possibility, of course, of using the tablet as well, if you were into that kind of thing. And I suppose there are other controllers out there that might work. I will say that the Atari trackball itself is not a very good option. The reason for that, and strangely, this game doesn't pull at a very fast rate. It only pulls once a frame. The Atari trackball, to work properly, pulled pretty quickly. A minimum of 1 millisecond is going to be required to make that thing work. And this game just doesn't pull fast enough to get that achievement. We could pull it 16 times in between one frame, but it really wouldn't give us much advantage because the game isn't going to ask for that data. So that is kind of an unfortunate thing. But, of course, as most of you know, you can use the original 5200 trackball. Incidentally, that trackball does not work anything like the Atari trackball. It's a very different beast. The guy that invented it did something kind of strange, and it kind of converts the digital readouts from the encoder to analog stick. So it's a very weird conversion in the way that it works. So yeah, trackballs aren't going to be very useful on this game unless you have a digital one, kind of like I had there with the Pippin. That was kind of the best option. But that does sum up our 5200. If you got any questions or things you'd like me to test and make a video on, I'd be happy to do that. And then, of course, same goes with the earlier shown 2600 or 7800 console. So this video was just primarily made to show a little appreciation for the Atari fans out there. Hope you enjoyed some of the content, and thanks for watching.